It's not every day that we get a collab character that's not actually a collab character. And it's certainly not every day we get a second version of a Nikke before their squad member even releases. Hinging on the border of copyright, D Killer Wife is now out, and she proves that Elysian can actually manufacture good units once in a while. Today, we're gonna see just how good Killer D is, and provide some build suggestions and team examples to see how this new cooldown reduction unit can be put to the test. My name is Psyche, and let's begin. So this video will be short and sweet, mainly because Killer D is a supporter, and while right off the bat, I wouldn't suggest dumping all of your resources and just save for a future unit instead. Let's start by going over D's kit, and you'll soon see why I wanted to make a build video. I will be using my typical skill leveling priorities and cutoffs to help you save some modules. D is a Type 1 supporter, fire code, sniper user, 6 shots in 1 magazine. Skill 1 triggers when she fires 3 full shots, and the next shot will gain Pierce. And upon full burst, all sniper allies will gain additional pierce damage. So something I like to do when I evaluate how good a skill is to first see in which scenarios it actually applies to. In this case, skill 1 only applies to sniper users, and their attacks need to pierce. So let's see who it covers. The main targets are gonna be Red Hood, Alice, and Maxwell. Unfortunately, this does not apply to Snow White, because if you look very closely, an assault rifle is not a sniper rifle, even though they changes to a sniper-like weapon on burst. This skill gets a low priority. D herself is not a DPS, so that piercing shot is nice once in a while, but for the time being, this buff doesn't apply to a lot of units, though obviously that could definitely change in the future. Skill 2, and oh boy, this is the big one. Now everyone was salivating at the idea of a new CDR unit. Now that those sacred words are appearing on the skill, well, that alone generated a lot of hype for this Killer Wife. Upon firing with a full charge 8 times, the cooldown of all units' burst is reduced, and the amount of reduction actually scaling with level, maxing out at 7 seconds at level 10. When firing every 5 charge shots, everyone will also gain an attack damage up for 10 seconds, with only a max of just over 5%. But hey, attack damage is better than just an attack up, so it's not nothing. Nonetheless, you don't need to be a genius to figure out that this skill gets a high priority. CDR remains one of the most powerful buffs in the game, with supports like Leader and Dorothy still taking the throne as some of the best support options. What's different about D's case is that the buff triggers on a condition that you can kinda control, instead of being tagged on as a burst ability or emptying a magazine. There are ways we can make D's CDR even faster, but let's finish explaining the kit first. The burst is 20 seconds, deals final attack damage to the closest target to the crosshair, and inflicts a status effect on them called Wipeout. When an ally's normal attack hits either the body or a part, they will gain an attack up and core damage up respectively. Again, let's first try to narrow down in which scenarios this is useful in. First, I'm assuming you're bringing D to a boss fight, as the wipeout state only affects one target, and it's unlikely that a normal enemy will have parts to begin with. Second, the boss should have a core that you can hit, assuming that you also want to take advantage of the damage out there. The wording is also a little off with the description, but when it says affects allies, it really means affects the respective allies that meets the conditions. It doesn't just give the buffs to everyone. Now, something players have found is that you can actually kinda exploit this, since at first you might think that you only get one buff or the other, either by hitting parts or the body of the target, but you can actually do both. I'll explain that in a bit in the gameplay section, but it's something to keep in mind for now. Still, the burst will receive a low priority. The modifiers are on the lower side, and if you consider that the attack up is actually dependent of D's own attack set, it's not going to be that high since supporters have low attack to begin with. Of course, if you absolutely want D to work meta-wise, you can push this burst higher. Gearing is pretty simple. At its core, if you don't care too much about meta or raids, you technically don't need any overload gear. D is a support, and any overload lines will not have as big as an impact versus investing the same materials into a DPS. So if we pull up the overload lines tier list, the only 2 stats I'm putting in situational are max ammo and charge speed. And even then, max ammo should get a higher priority in this case. Since D's CDR ability is dependent on how fast she can fire fully charged shots, you can minimize how often she has to reload if you get a couple of these lines. D has a default magazine size of 6, and since her CDR ability takes 8 shots, having 1 or 2 good lines of max ammo or something less but combined with the right cube can make the cooldown more consistent. Attack? Well, it's at least better than nothing, and everything else you don't need or it does not provide a significant enough buff. And even then, you will realistically only need 1 or 2 max ammo lines. Something I like to consider when it comes to character builds in a gacha game is opportunity cost. Yes, you can use resilience here, but it's only got a limited amount of slots, and I really think they should increase that amount in an update to account for the game's growing roster. You can also use wingman or adjutant here, in case resilient isn't available. But again, D is a supporter. You don't need to save your best cubes and gear for this. Okay, yes, there's actually a gameplay section. Something intriguing about D as a CDR unit is that her ability is tied to how often she can fire off fully charged shots, meaning absolutely no spamming. Since she is a supporter anyways, you can just focus on your main DPSs, as when D is placed on auto, she will only fire off shots when it's fully charged anyways. Something else to consider is that D will offer 2 instances of damage boost during full burst, if you recall. Once when hitting the target on a part, and another when hitting the body. This can make your gameplay a bit more nuanced. Even though I said to leave the burst at a low level, it still doesn't hurt if you want to min-max your team's performance, because the wipeout state lasts for 10 seconds, or for the duration of the full burst, and the 2 damage buffs also lasting for 10 seconds. With your main DPS unit, try to aim at the boss's body as well as a part really quickly. Using auto-aim, you can just drag the reticle to another location to trigger both buffs. You can technically do this with any weapon type, but snipers will have to do a bit more legwork. Again, it's not a huge buff, but I quite like this, and it gives players a bit extra if they put in the effort to micromanage their gameplay a bit. Now, just to clarify, for all of these components to work, this assumes that the boss has parts, and they have a core that you can hit to take advantage of the core damage. If they have one but not the other, then you don't have to worry about this. So this is where it gets interesting. Because of the way D's CDR ability works, it makes her a bit different from the other cooldown reduction units we've had so far. If we assume that you are a normal player and plays the game the normal way, then you can just simply slot her in just like any other typical CDR unit. She can technically work in most teams as core and attack damage are quite universal. If you want to take full advantage of her kit, some of the best DPSs are Red Hood, Alice, and Maxwell, since they can take advantage of the Pierce damage bonus from skill 1, as they are sniper users. D can comfortably replace leader in the schoolgirl support core, where you can allocate leader to another team. I do want to state that she definitely works better in bosses versus campaign content, as normal enemies don't typically have parts to hit, and assuming you put her on autoplay, because of the small enemies move around a lot, the AI will need some time tracking them down, which can slow down your CDR process as D will fire shots slower. So in that sense, she's not as universal as the leader. But no doubt, D is very good in the current solo raid, as the boss is weak to fire and has the cancel ring attack that requires a fire code ally to clear it. Now, that would have been the end of the team section if you're a normal player, but in case you want to get a little freaky, Killer D has something else in store. There are certain Type 2 burst units with 40-second cooldowns, like Polly and Biscuit. Normally, you will be forced to run another Type 2 unit in the team, as their burst can't be used every rotation. But if you have a decently invested D, you can actually bypass this. So in the training room, I tried out a team where Polly was the sole Type 2 unit, and I also maxed out D's skill 2. If you manage it right, you can see that while you still have to wait like 3 seconds for Polly's burst to refresh, you can indeed get away with only running one 40-second cooldown unit. This can even be extended to any other unit with a 40-second cooldown, including Type 3 DPSs. This means you can actually just burst with Red Hood every rotation, assuming D's CDR matches the timing. This can be a little hard to do consistently, and there's bound to be a bit of math behind the scenes. But for the meantime, the fact that this is possible means that D can open up some new team comps in the future where something like this could not have been done before. Some have even tried putting D and another CDR unit like leader in the same team to see if it can cycle through rotations more consistently. And while it's definitely possible, you also have to consider that you could have placed your leader in another team for raid content, and she's just not a resource you can freely allocate. You can even do some memeing by alternating between Tia and Christmas Rupees burst to perpetually stay in burst 1. Is it good? No. Is it funny? It's hilarious. At the end of the day, D Killer Wife is another solid CDR unit added to the roster. The utility of cooldown reduction has not changed since day one. It is a fantastic buff type and still one of the most powerful. Her unique way to trigger it also allows for some team configurations that normally wouldn't be possible to start appearing, and opens the way for more creative teams to rise going forward. I wouldn't say she's as good as leader. That cover repair and universal attack up is just way too good to pass up. But after shamelessly skipping Alec, I'm pretty excited to have another powerhouse support unit to play with. Overall, Killer D gets a 4 out of 5 rating from me. I don't think she's a must pull, or at the least, if I was given the choice between D and leader, I'd still pick leader pretty easily. Still, I'd say that if you had the resources, just one copy is good enough for now. She is part of the standard pool, so even if you miss your chance here, she'll find a way to your roster sometime later. I still don't know if another collab event is coming. The Chainsaw Man event will have ended at around the same time as the current event ends, so I'm still stockpiling my pulls for the meantime. Anyways, let me know if you were tempted by this killer wife, and how she's working out for you. Thank you for watching, and as always, have fun with the game.